The poll finds that Americans of all races and age groups share significant concerns about discrimination nearly 2 months after George Floyd, a black man, was killed in police custody in Minneapolis. This is the Wall Street Journal reporting. Nearly 3/4 of Americans, 71%, believe that race relations are either very or fairly bad, a 16-point increase since February. That's not a great shock considering we've had actual race riots across the United States egged on by the white woke left. I mean, when you see entire major American cities shut down for a week while people riot in the streets, you might think, oh yeah, race relations are getting worse. By the way, one of the things that is important to note, race relations in every poll have been getting consistently worse since Barack Obama was elected. Why? Well, because there was an optimism when Obama was elected that we were going to move into the post-racial era that MLK had once dreamed of, when people would judge each other on the basis of their individuality rather than the color of their skin. Then we were told that we can't do that. That if you say that I judge you as an individual and not based on the color of your skin, that is in and of itself racist because you are failing to recognize the most important factor about someone, which is their race. Race relations have been getting steadily worse. It didn't start with Trump. The media have said that it's about Trump. Wrong. Go back and look at the polling. The question of positivity or negativity about race relations, it's been getting worse every year since Barack Obama was elected. The height of optimism was literally the week Obama was elected. And then it's been going down ever since. In other signs of substantial shifts in views on race, more voters see racial bias as a feature of American society and support protests aimed at addressing it. Nearly 60% in the survey said that black people face discrimination. Just over half said so of Hispanics, about double the shares from 2008. Now, the thing about poll questions is you have to kind of determine what exactly are people perceiving when the question is asked. Example. So if the question was, do black people face discrimination? The answer is obviously yes, because there are racists in American society. So sure, I mean, of course. If the question is, does American society discriminate against black people? Broadly speaking, the answer is no. If the question is, do America's legal institutions discriminate against black people? The answer is pretty obviously no. In fact, the only legal programs based on race are created to benefit people who are black, right? Questions like affirmative action. Support has also grown for two of the public responses to concerns about inequality, the Black Lives Matter movement and professional athletes' practice of kneeling during the national anthem. So in terms of views on racism, percentage who agree that American society is racist, according to this poll, 46% of men agree. 66% of women agree. And these are the women who have been cudgeled into thinking so by the Washington Post so they can write puff pieces about how you're confronting your own racism. 51% of white Americans say that American society is racist, which, by the way, is pretty incredible, right? Half of white Americans say American society is racist. So who are the racists? The people who don't say that American society is racist? 78% of black Americans say American society is racist. 60% of Hispanics say American society is racist. Now, here is the really interesting stat. Okay, ready? 82% of Democrats, 82% say American society is racist. 45% of independents say it's racist. 30% of Republicans say it's racist. So in other words, the disproportion here is not between Democrats and Republicans. It's between Democrats and everybody else. Democrats are up at 82% say American society is racist. Independents and Republicans below 50. If you are aged 18 to 34, 65% believe American society is racist. If you're above the age of 65, only 53% believe that American society is racist. So in other words, we have inculcated in young people the least discriminated against people in the history of the world in America. Okay, if you're 18 years old in America, you don't remember Jim Crow? Your parents may not remember Jim Crow? If you're 18 years old, that means that you were born after the year 2000. The idea that you have experienced vast discrimination in America between the years 2000 and 2020 is generally absurd. That doesn't mean that you haven't experienced racism. Hey, I'm a Jew. I've experienced anti-Semitism. In fact, I've experienced a fair bit of it in the last few years. You know what? That doesn't mean that American society is endemically anti-Semitic. It isn't. Noting that there are anti-Semites does not mean that American society is anti-Semitic, because it is not. Noting that black people experience racism in their lives is not the same as noting that American society is generally racist. Not the same thing. The conflation of those two things is incredibly dangerous, because what do you mean when you say American society is racist? You mean its structures and its institutions. Namely, you mean its philosophy and its culture and its history. Right? All the things that tie the nation together, if you call those racist, you're disintegrating them. In its deepest look at race in America in 2 decades, the Journal NBC News poll shows members of the two parties hold sharply different opinions about the extent of racial discrimination. An overwhelming majority of Democrats, 90%, say black people are discriminated against, whereas 26% of Americans agreed. Again, these questions are vaguely worded, and they allow a lot of wiggle room. If you say, do Americans' legal systems discriminate against black Americans? That'd be a much more specific question. 82% of Democrats believe American society is racist. Only 30% of Republicans do. 57% of voters said they support the protests sparked by Floyd's killing. 58% said they are more concerned with racial inequality as a result of the demonstrations, because everybody understands that you are sort of supposed to say this. If you weren't, I don't understand why you weren't concerned with racial problems before this. But apparently people got more concerned in just a few short weeks. On specific questions like kneeling, in August of 2018, 54% of Americans thought that kneeling during the national anthem to protest racial inequality was inappropriate. Only 43% of Americans thought it was appropriate. By the way, the numbers were even more on behalf of not appropriate before Trump was elected. Trump jumped into that culture war. A lot of people took the other side just because they don't like Trump. So it used to be like a 60-40 proposition, maybe a 65-35% proposition. People didn't like kneeling for the national anthem because they felt like, okay, police brutality does not represent the flag, and the flag doesn't represent police brutality. That's absurd. The flag represents the fact that people get to play athletics for millions of dollars regardless of race, right? That's more representative of the American flag than incidents of police brutality. Okay, so most Americans thought this was a bad idea. Now, 52% of Americans say it is appropriate for athletes and football players to kneel during the national anthem. 45% say it is not appropriate. Again, if you believe that the American flag represents police brutality, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. There are only two groups of people who actually believe the American flag, in its essence, represents police brutality or defends police brutality. White supremacists and the woke. Everybody else recognizes that police brutality is acting outside the scope of agency. And scope of agency is a legal concept. If I deploy you to go get me a pizza as my agent, and then you veer off the road and decide to strike a child with your car, you have acted outside the scope of agency. Okay, when a policeman acts brutally, that is outside the scope of agency. Nobody said to the policeman, go act brutally. So the kneeling question has shifted pretty dramatically. Furthermore, a majority of black voters in the survey, 65%, this is the key question, said that people of color experience racial discrimination because it is built into American society, including U.S. policies and institutions. Right? That's the devastating question. So 2 in 3 black Americans believe that racial discrimination is not endemic to human nature, and it's not just a matter of individual sin. It is built into the systems, which inherently means you got to tear down the entire system in order to fight racial discrimination. That's a disintegrationist worldview. And that is being promulgated by our media. It's being promulgated by folks who are attempting to foster racial conflict. It is a perspective on American society that is generally oriented at destroying anything that could possibly bind us. A plurality of white voters, 48%, attribute racial discrimination to individuals who hold racist views as opposed to institutions and society as a whole, which, by the way, is much more accurate, because if you're going to point to it, I've been saying this for years, if you're going to say institutional racism, you have to point to the institution and you have to explain how it is racist. And it is not enough to say, well, you know, policing, when it first started, was about slave catching. Fast forward 200 years and it's exactly the same. None of this fast forward crap. Okay, because fast forwarding means you skipped the entire plot. Okay, just like if you're watching a movie and you don't know the plot, if you start with the first 5 minutes and you fast forward to the end, you don't get the plot. If you go 1619, 2020, no difference. You just skipped 400 years somewhere in there. And there's been a few developments in that time. Views of the Black Lives Matter movement also differ by race. 76% of black voters hold a positive view. Views are evenly divided among white voters. 42% hold a positive view, 39% a negative one. And again, one of the issues here is that when it comes to these issues, there is so much semantic overload. And when people say Black Lives Matter, do they mean that we want black people to live full and prosperous lives? If so, there should be 100% agreement. I agree with that. If what we mean is the Black Lives Matter organization is good, no. The Black Lives Matter organization is horrible neo-Marxist garbage. The Black Lives Matter organization, again, not the protesters, not the phrase, the actual organization, Black Lives Matter, which you can find on the web, I think it's blacklivesmatter.org or something. It's a neo-Marxist garbage organization. It is openly anti-Semitic. It is a terrible organization. So the problem with poll questions like this is it's unclear what exactly people are asked to side behind, so you get an unclear result. 3/4 of voters said they were encouraged the country is addressing longstanding issues of racism in society. So I think this is the hopeful stat here, right? That suggests that maybe the disintegrationists are not going to win, is that it really suggests this stat might be the most telling one of all. That 3/4 of voters say they are encouraged the country is addressing these issues, meaning just by us responding to this poll, we're hoping that we can tie the country back together again. We've shown we don't like racism, so can we please go back to normal? I think that's really what that poll stat is saying. At the same time, half said they were concerned that the protests over racial issues are creating social unrest and bringing too much change to the country, including erasing America's history and significant figures in it, which, of course, that should, again, be a 75% proposition, not a 50% proposition. What these stats show is that we're living on knife's edge when it comes to the preservation of the factors that allow a society to continue forward in positive fashion. That's what my new book is about. It is being lived out every single day. I didn't know that my book was going to be quite as relevant as it has become even in the past few weeks. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.